Welcome to the Apprentice Advantage, a podcast where we discuss everything apprenticeships and how your company can start developing your talent workforce. I'm your host, Sheena, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Leah.
Hi.
So in this episode of our podcast, we'll be discussing the place for apprenticeships in the tech world, some of the surprising skills that apprentices can learn during their training, and also what it really means to build a talent pipeline. Today, we're joined by Dan Weagle, the Business Development Director at Apprenti National. Thank you so much for coming in today, Dan.
Really, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about apprenticeship today.
Oh, we're excited too. And so honored to have you for our first episode too.
I'm excited to be here for the first episode. Really appreciate the invite. We're going to kick it off on a high note.
Yes, let's kick it off on a high note.
Absolutely. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do and what Apprenti National is?
Apprenti National is an organization that is a nonprofit that focuses on building the tech skills that are needed by the companies that have the jobs that are in demand by employees.
Awesome. So apprenticeships, we're used to that more in a craftsman's trade kind of situation. So what exactly is a tech apprenticeship? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of people think about apprentice, they think about electricians, they think about pipe fitters, they think about plumbers. And in fact, that is how apprenticeship has been done for decades and decades. It's a time-proven model to take an individual that is looking to learn about that occupation, pair them with somebody who already knows about the occupation, and provide them with the technical skills necessary to perform that occupation and learn. And so we've been able to, since 2016, so for nearly a decade now, take those same practical applications of registered apprenticeship that have worked for decades and decades in the trades and bring them over to technical occupations. So software developers, UX designers, cybersecurity analysts. So it's really been rewarding in that it's solving two problems that industries face. They face the challenge of bringing in high quality technical net new employees, and they're also struggling to diversify their tech pools. So a lot of times they'll go to colleges, universities to identify promising candidates to step into these early career roles. The problem is that colleges and universities can't keep up with the demand of the tech world to be able to provide enough employees. So a registered apprenticeship solves both of those needs.
That's awesome. I don't know about you, but I'm very much a hands-on learner.
Yeah.
So that's what I really appreciate about these apprenticeship programs.
Right. So this program sounds really cool, right? But what is the average age of a candidate that goes through Apprenti?
Yeah, I love that question in the same scope, in that a lot of people, when they think about an apprentice, they think about someone who's just graduated from high school. Maybe they're not going on to college. Maybe they're pursuing a trade instead. So they're thinking of a relatively young person, maybe 18 years old, when in fact, the average age of an apprentice apprentice is 32 years old. So this could be an individual that is a career pivoter. Maybe they have stepped into one occupation or one career pathway, and they've realized that they've reached a plateau. They're not going to progress past that point in that particular career pathway. And so they're looking for a way to get into tech, and registered apprenticeship through the Apprenti program provides the connection between the employers, the mentors, and provides the technical training necessary for that individual to have an opportunity to prove themselves, show that they have the attitude, appetite, and aptitude to be successful in tech and really start off in the right way in that career. And the other thing that I'll say about the average age, or since you asked about the average age of an apprentice, is that the youngest apprentice that we've placed at Apprenti is 18 years old. And then the most experienced apprentice that we've placed is 64 years old. So it really can be for anyone who's interested in getting into the tech field.
Man, I also love that, just diversity in general, but also diversity in age. So can you tell me, are there any memorable apprentices and any memorable experiences with some apprentices?
Yeah. So I think back to when I first started at Apprenti about 3 years ago. And one of the very first apprentices that I met, this is during right after the pandemic. I talked about attitude and appetite earlier. This individual was an entrepreneur. He started his own company with his wife where they were cleaning office buildings at night. So, right, everyone's in the office. You've got trash being produced. You've got the kitchen that needs to be cleaned in the shared office environment. And that's what their company did. They would do that for the entire office building and multiple office buildings all at night. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, there was no one going into the office. There was no need to have someone come in and clean the offices at night. So overnight, this individual had been an entrepreneur, created his own profitable business with his wife, and then immediately that switch was turned off. So this individual had to recreate themselves. They found the Apprenti program. They got paired with an employer. They got the skills that they needed through related technical instruction, which is the classroom technical training necessary to be successful when starting the on-the-job training. The employer provided the mentor for this person to be getting paid the entire time while learning how to be a cybersecurity analyst at that organization. I had mentioned this about 3 years ago. That person is still at that company to this day.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow. So as you started to talk about employers, tell us a little bit more about corporate engagement, right? So do you find that a lot of organizations are like running to jump at the idea of bringing on an apprentice, or are there some barriers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some organizations are really embracing registered apprenticeship. They're determining, right, I have this need. I'm interested in identifying candidates that are not coming from our traditional pathways like university recruitment. And I want to broaden the funnel from which I'm drawing talent. And other organizations are satisfied with their existing university recruiting and existing emerging talent pipelines. It really depends on the organization. What it is consistent among all of the conversations with employer partners is the need to educate. When we opened up this podcast, we were talking about that the average apprentice is 32 years old. And a lot of times we think about an apprentice being 18 years old. So it's those types of engagements and explaining how registered apprenticeship works, explaining the benefit to the apprentice, explaining the benefit to the employer, that it's a competency-driven model where the wages are commensurate with the competencies earned by the apprentices, and that the designation of the program is to retain the apprentice long-term. That's a differentiator between an internship program or a co-op program. When we think about, let me ask you, when you think about an internship or a co-op, like what do you think in terms of how long that person will be at the organization?
Pretty temporary.
Yeah. So that's another thing that we need to work to educate our employers on, is that when the apprentice starts with you, they're a W-2 employee. They receive all the same benefits that any other early career employee would have at your organization. You're investing your time, just as you would for an internship program or for a co-op program, in the apprentice, but the benefits to you by the apprentice wanting to stay at the end of their 1 year of on-the-job training. And in fact, here in Pittsburgh, I'm really impressed with your statistics. 97% of apprentices are retained by the original hiring partner.
Right.
As opposed to a lot of internship programs, which are fantastic programs, the levels are much lower on the retention. They're designed that way. It's because internship programs, co-op programs are experiential learning programs for someone who's oftentimes in college. It's a way for them to determine, is this something that's right for me? Whereas apprenticeship is a workforce development program. The apprentice has already determined, this is what I want to do. The employer has already determined, I need more employees like you. They invest in one another so that the outcomes are much higher.
Right. So I know here in Pittsburgh, our partnership with the Apprenti, we really have just had some difficulties with trying to get across that red tape when it comes to working with employers. A lot of times they want to hire an apprentice, they want to have more diverse candidates in the workforce, but they can't seem to get through those barriers of needing a 4-year degree or a certain amount of experience, right? So what would you say to those employers that are looking to say, hey, I want to make a difference, but again, just with legal, with HR, we do have our requirements that we have to follow as well.
Yeah. What I love about your program is that you have a very consultative approach, and you're willing to meet the employer where they're at. So you're willing to sit down, have a conversation with legal, with learning and development, with HR to understand, okay, what are those obstacles? Are these obstacles that can be overcome? How can they be overcome in an equitable way? If they do have a 4-year degree requirement, why is that? Is there an opportunity for a different level of that same occupation, make it so that there's not a 4-year degree requirement, or that the 4-year degree requirement maps to certification, which can be earned during the related technical instruction piece of the registered apprenticeship program. So it's the consultative approach that you all take to understand what are the hangups, what are the challenges, how can they be overcome, so that we can all move forward to really make a difference for Pittsburgh residents who are the beneficiaries of the registered apprenticeship program, as well as the employers who are the beneficiaries of getting that tech talent that they need and being able to invest in that tech talent long term.
Yeah, so like kind of like piggybacking off of that, I have heard like kind of like the apprenticeship, like the apprentice like employer relationship is a little different, obviously, than like the intern or the like the regular employee. And I heard that it does have like its own like benefits as well. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've spoken with a lot of organizations that have internship programs. And one of the things they love their internship programs, as they should, and they should be proud of them. Sometimes it can be difficult to find mentors for those internship programs because they'll say, I went back to this great mentor we have, and they can't do it right now because it was just too heavy of a lift for them last summer. They've got a lot on their plate this summer. They can't make that commitment. And in part, the difficulty of aligning that commitment is that you're aligning that commitment from that high achiever in your organization that wants to be a mentor, but who might be frustrated that the person that they've invested their time in as an intern is not made a job offer at the conclusion of their internship, or they're offered, but they do not accept the job offer because they determine, you know what, I thought I might be interested in this, but this industry isn't right for me. Whereas for apprenticeships, and the other thing I'll say about internships is you have to be selective of your projects, right? You might say, I'm really too busy. I have all these long-term projects and I don't feel comfortable. It wouldn't make sense to give some of these responsibilities to an apprentice that will only be here for 8 weeks. Whereas for a registered apprenticeship program, that apprentice is going to be with you for at minimum 1 year, 2,000 hours. So you can feel comfortable giving a lot of more longer-term projects to that apprentice to see them grow, because that's good for the apprentice. And actually, it's baked into their competency requirements is that they need to get exposure to different projects at the short term, long term, and build on those skills that they're learning at your environment, working on real world projects. So that's a thing that I think is a pleasant surprise to a lot of employers is they're thinking, I'm going to invest this time in this individual, or maybe I've had experiences in the past investing time in an individual that's only here for a short period of time. But with an apprentice, that person's there for at minimum a year. And in the case of Pittsburgh Technology Council, 97% of the time, they're converted to a permanent employee and they continue to remain with the original hiring partner after that full year.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I know this week we've had really a full week. We've been working with employers. We had an employer brunch. We were able to meet with some apprentices at our Apprenti Mixer. We even had an opportunity to engage with our community partners, talk about wraparound support, how we can be more collaborative, and some of our candidates in the candidate pool, right? So with all of that engagement, we really were able to see how just this whole ecosystem work. So what are some things that you were able to pull from these events that went on this week?
Yeah, it's that we all play a role, right? How we partner is that you have the relationships with the local businesses. You have the relationships with the community-based organizations. You have the relationships with a lot of the apprentices themselves because you're here and you get to interact with those apprentices. Apprenti is very good at understanding how to run a registered apprenticeship program, both at the state level here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as at the federal level. We have expertise when it comes to our access team and providing resources to apprentices who may raise their hand and say, I'm struggling with related technical instruction, or I have a question about how to go through the candidate pool and how to be ready to pass the assessment. So we provide a lot of resources on the regulatory side, on the logistical side for running a high fidelity registered apprenticeship program. You have all of these rich relationships with all the stakeholders that you mentioned, and you're managing those relationships in real time to deliver high quality outcomes for the employers that they expect, and they should rightfully expect, because that's what all of our statistics have shown for nearly the last decade.
Right.
Yeah, we are so lucky to have a relationship with Apprenti here. The Pittsburgh Technology Council and 40 by 80. It's one of the programs that excites me the most. So just for any employers who might be watching or listening to this today, what is one thing that you would like them to take away from this talk?
That's a great question. Let's work together, because we can take off the lift that might be perceived around registered apprenticeship. Again, it goes back to the education piece. A lot of employers might hear the word registered apprenticeship. They might know that the government is involved in that. These standards are filed for the apprentices. There's certain competencies that the apprentices are tracking toward, along with their hiring manager. And they might think like, why wouldn't I just go source talent from directly from a boot camp? And then, I can plug that person into my, candidate pool, and I'll have a successful time with that type of engagement. And I think that the host of services that we offer and the amount of work that we take off of the plates of the employers to provide funding to offset the training associated with the program, to provide the resources and community-based organizational supports necessary for that candidate to be able to get to their job, or for childcare. All of these things are lifts that we can take off of the employer so that they can focus on providing mentorship to that apprentice so that they can retain that apprentice long-term.